Amen. Well, it's getting close to the end of June, and I know that for many of you who might have teenagers in the house, that this is a very exciting time for them because graduation is here. I speak of this quite personally because, and I can hardly believe this, that we have 4 grandsons, Gord and I. We're very blessed to have 4 grandsons. And 2 of them, who are twins, are graduating from grade 9 this week. And this has meant that there's been much scurrying about, getting ready and prepared, new belts, new shoes, new pants, new shirts, and I know that Gord was quite honored a week or so ago when one of the grandsons went up to his famous tie collection. Gord, by the way, if you need any ties, Gord has them from 1970. So that means that all the different fashions are there, from skinny to fat, to short to long. If you're in need of one, just give my beloved husband a call and take one of them away. At any rate, our handsome grandson, Eamon, and Gord went up to the bedroom, and he came down with a couple of ties that he chose. We'll see if they turn up on Thursday when we go to the graduation. Our other grandson, being a wee bit bolder, his mother ordered him some paisley cloth so that he could have a paisley bow tie, which has been made for him. So we'll try and maybe take a picture or 2 or 3. But I brought with me an apple because I want to, this from last week. No, I'm not doing last week. We had last week who had an apple. But I'm bringing one again, the Golden Apple Award to teachers. To teachers, wherever they are in this vast country of ours and around the world, for taking young people and into their hearts and minds and helping them to become, move toward maturity as adults. And so I give this Golden Apple Award to having lived with a teacher for all these years, and our daughter is a teacher. I'm familiar with all that goes on in a household in terms of one of the members of the household being a teacher. And that brings me around to Jesus. You see, Jesus was an incredible teacher, and if he was standing here beside me, I'd give him a Golden Apple Award because there are many things that Jesus did, but one of his most profound gifts for the world was his teaching ability. And he taught in parables. Parables are those stories within the larger story of the Bible, stories that are short, sharp, have a real point to them, and they are earthly stories that lead to heavenly thoughts and interior thoughts. Something that's going on outside, a story is told that speaks to us on the inside. And so Michael read for us this morning from the Gospel of Mark. The parables that are in the text, they only appear in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. There are no parables in the Gospel of John. The synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all contain parables spoken by Jesus. And there are some 40 parables in those 3 books. There are some other books outside the Bible that also have parables that we don't typically read in church on a Sunday morning. But using a parable, telling a story, is an incredible way to get a point across or to make us go inward. So parables, there are 4 things you need to know about parables, the parables that Jesus spoke to his disciples. They are, of course, stories, and they are not historical fact. Sometimes biblical scholars have spent inordinate amounts of time trying to prove that the Good Samaritan actually went along this road and found a guy in a ditch. That isn't the point of the story. The story, whether it's historical or not, is not really important in the telling of the parable. And there are so many beautiful parables in the scriptural text that, the woman with the lost coin, looking for that lost coin, or the landlord who's really not a great landlord. And that tells us the second thing about parables. They're grounded in something that the people who hear them can understand, in a context that they would understand, that they see themselves, can see themselves in that story. So the story really catches them, compels them, and invites them in, and they understand the context in which the story is being told. I can just imagine that woman searching for a lost coin, so very, very poor, and searching all corners of her house for this coin, this precious, beautiful piece of learning that was in that parable around the lost coin. So, they're not historical fact. They're in a context that the hearer can understand. Number 3, that they are stories that are told for a purpose, that there's something behind the story that everyone can kind of grasp in a different way. So it is a story that compels you, as I've already said, and pulls you in. It's usually very short and doesn't go on for a long time, but it is that compelling nature of it that pulls us in and wants us to hear the story. The fourth thing about parables is that there is no standard interpretation of a parable. So anything that I'm going to say about these parables in Mark, if it doesn't resonate with you, that's just fine. It shouldn't, in terms of you need to do the work yourself. You need to say, what was Jesus trying to say to me when he told this parable? What was he trying to say to his disciples? And then is there something there for me in the living of my life? So each parable is so uniquely, incredibly wondrous that it is for you. And take it as the gift for you. Yes, millions have read it, but it has been spoken and told for you. That's a very important part of a parable in terms of that. So that's a literary genre, a way of teaching that Jesus used so profoundly and wonderfully to his disciples. So let's look at the Gospel of Mark, and that Michael has just read for us, the planting of seeds. And of course it would make sense. It was an agrarian society generally, and so they would understand this whole thing, the cycles of planting and watering and growing and harvesting. And often the parables, and this is another thing that, perhaps the fifth thing about a parable, is that we've often interpreted them as meaning something about the kingdom of God outside. That somehow the kingdom of God is somewhere, I'm not sure where now, because we know the earth is round. Is it up, down? Where is the kingdom of God? And Jesus often, he says, this is like the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is like this lost coin. And when it is found, there is great joy in the household. Or in the case of this parable around growing, the kingdom of God is like a small seed. And you hardly notice it. And people walk by it and they walk over it. Or it's like a mustard seed that hardly is noticed at all. And yet it grows into an incredible bush. So he compares these things, these ordinary things, to the kingdom of God. This is how you find the kingdom of God. You can see the kingdom of God in these small things. But I would like to argue that the kingdom of God, I'm just going to leave that to God, actually, that part, because I don't know about that part. I don't know what that's like. And in fact, none of us do, because we're still living. And so the kingdom of God, we can say, well, based on some of what Jesus said. But at the end of the day, We don't really know what that's like. He tried to teach us a wee bit. But I would argue that the kingdom of God is here, within each one of you. I would argue that passionately. You are an expression of the kingdom of God. How you live, how you love, how you interact, how you conduct yourself in the world, how you are compassionate, that is a window on the kingdom of God. In the Gospel of Thomas, which is outside the scriptural text that we use, there's a kingdom, it's sayings gospel, and Thomas says, the kingdom of God is within you and all around you. The kingdom of God is within you and all around you. So this is an argument from Thomas for us to live in the now. I'm not worried about the kingdom of God, actually, out there, wherever it might be, up, down, around, as a place with streets paved with gold. No, I'm in the now. This is my kingdom. You are my fellow journeyers in the kingdom. I live the kingdom every day because of what's in our hearts and how we live in the world. We express the ministry of Jesus. Some choose to call it the kingdom of God. Others call it other things. But I know that how I am now, living in the now, is where the kingdom is. And it is in each one of you, in each one of us. And we are blessed when we get together on a Sunday morning like this. We are blessed to have each other, to remind us that the kingdom of God, that place of compassion and love and justice and hope and dreaming, is lived in the now, in the reality of us. Please don't ever diminish who you are and what you mean in this world. That's why Jesus used this parable of the tiniest little seed. Oh, by the way, I need to say that I think farmers or gardeners or people who grow things from little seeds you can hardly see are amazing, especially in Calgary, where everything dies because we get frost so late and early and all those things. But is there anything more faithful act in this world than to dig a little hole in the soil, stick this almost seed you can hardly see in it, and have faith that something will grow and bring beauty to the world or feed the world? So that's my aside for all of you faithful gardeners. You are living this parable in the Gospel of Mark. And you are planting the seeds of the kingdom because you make our world a beautiful place in terms of that. So what I'm offering to you is that you are an embodiment of the kingdom, each one of you, and how you live now in this moment. And I found a lovely little book called 101 Simple Truths for a Better Life, written by a rapper, a Sikh rapper, who has, and it must be a good book because Heather, you know, who owns Indigo Books and things, it's got right on there, Heather's Pick. So that means it's got to have wisdom in it, right? So I read through, and I'll just give you a couple of these to you. And his last name is Humble, and he's won awards and stuff. And so allow me to read some of these little gems about how to live the kingdom here in this moment in your life. The $10, by the way, is for the donuts afterward. I didn't know where else to put it. I thought, here, no. So, okay. This is chapter 12, I guess. When was the world fair? The world isn't fair. Never was, never will be. To expect reciprocity for being a good person is like sticking your hand in the cage of a lioness and expecting her not to bite your arm off, because after all, you wouldn't do that to her. But be a good person in spite of it. Be a good person. Be a just person. Treat all fairly and live in peace and harmony. Go right ahead and do that, even though the world might scorn you. Do that. Another one. Heartbreak, like any other struggle, is essential for your growth. There isn't a person in this room, I know it in my heart, there's not a person in this room who hasn't experienced heartbreak in one way, shape, or form. No one leads a charmed life, even though we might look across to them and say, my, they're leading a charmed life. It's not true. Every life has heartbreak in it. And so that's part of living in the now and in the kingdom, is that we who love one another tend to that heartbreak and are there for that person so that we might share that and find strength to live in this life. And one more. Within all of us, there are things worth celebrating, and I am blessed to see that every week in my life of work here at Central. Within all of us, there are things worth celebrating, and things that we're not the most proud of. The choice is what we decide to focus on. And so if we let those things that we've done that we regret, if we let those things from the past intrude on our now, then our kingdom is shredded. And so we need to, yes, learn from what we've done in the past, bring it into the now, and seek to rebuild the kingdom within us that brings justice and peace, and above all, love to the world. May you go forth and read those 40-some parables in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and find an opportunity there to bring those parables into your own life, because they are, as I said to you already, they are written